Hello my friends, so I'm going to conclude my tutorial today on how to create scenes with lots and lots of people in them. Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this scene which has 28 clothed figures in a single render, and these are full poser figures. You could do the same thing in DAZ Studio, but we're going to stick with poser for today. And the advantage of a fully clothed figure is that they cast shadows properly. You can put your own clothes, you can put your own poses. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. So they're much more flexible than billboards, and they're a much higher quality than low poly figures. So this is the gold standard. So this is going to be our end objective. So the first thing that we need to do, here's Poser, is that you need to load a set or create a set. So in this particular case, what I'm using is this set called Blooming Alley from Andrei Pestryakov, and it's a beautiful set, extremely memory heavy. There's hundreds of flowers, yeah, maybe even thousands if you include the ones on bushes, and dozens, if not hundreds of trees, probably dozens of trees, and grass and all kinds of stuff. So just this scene on its own, very, very memory intensive. But whether we use this or we use an office or a playground or whatever set, the first thing you can do is you're going to want to load your set. The next thing you're going to want to do is set up any background lighting here. So, no, well, not lighting, but sky domes or whatever, which I've got here. I've got Terradome in the background. And then, so I can move around this set here. See, I have a Terradome in the background. And then you're going to want to create any lighting. I think I'll probably just have infinite lighting here, just a single point. It's not very sophisticated. They're just a single point infinite light. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that scene. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a custom camera. So I'm going to create a new camera, which we do object, create camera, dolly, and then we're going to view the set through that camera here. So I've called it my cam, which you can see here in the list of cameras, my cam. And this is the camera view that I want on the set. So it's high enough for people at the back to be sitting on the benches and for people at the front to be standing. For some reason, it's got weird displacement on this. I see the way the ground's kind of wavy. It's a bit off-putting, actually. Let's have a look at the original set. Yeah, I think this was I think it was created for DAZ Studio, not. Oh no, it was created for Poser. But anyway, it's not displaying properly. It's got too much displacement on. Anyway, I'm not going to get distracted. So I've created a camera, I've created lighting, and I've loaded a set, and I've created background. I've also used my Terradome for this blank area here. If I choose Terradome and make it invisible, you'll see the problem. I'll just go back to my main cam. M for main. So I'm using Terradome to create this sky, but if I make Terradome invisible, you'll see that there's actually this ground area here where this set doesn't extend far enough out. And from my camera position here, the camera shows the ground is missing. So the great thing about Terradome is it creates ground with different textures for the ground as well. Then we're going to save that set. So I've just saved it as many people template. So that's now my template set. Now, this is the important thing. You might want to save the lighting in the libraries, and you might want to save the camera in the libraries, or you can save camera here. And I use what's the guy's name? Kenny Levin's lighting script, light dots, and then it's down here, then I can save the lighting here as a light dot, and then I can apply it to other sets. But whatever you do, you can save the lighting in case you want to apply it to other sets. Now, theoretically, this lighting and the camera should come into the new set. There's one other way that you could have saved it, is you could save it to the library scenes. Let me see if I can just open the library for you a second. Libraries, and don't use link, and then in the libraries we can save it in here, scene, and then that just makes it a little bit quicker there, and you can save that as a scene and then just load the whole scene by clicking. Okay, so we've got our set here and it's saved. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add figures to this set, but before we do that, ideally you want to have the set, the scene in your imagination, what you're going to do in the scene. But if you're just building a scene just to kind of fill a space, you're just going to keep in mind that what you want is pools of figures that don't overlap each other and don't cast shadows on each other. So here the light is coming from over here, so the shadows are going to cast this way, which increases the size of the figures. If we go back here, you'll see here this shadow kind of interrupts into this area, intrudes into this area. But ideally, if you can have a scene where it can be divided, say here, divided vertically here, or divided into groups of non-overlapping figures. So you could have this little group here, oops, excuse me, you could have that little group there, you could have this group here, you could have that little group there at the back, you could have her on your own, you could have this little group. And then what you're going to do is you're going to add figures to your set. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of loading and they're very large scenes, so I'm not going to make you wait while I do that. So I'm just going to load my first scene which has figures in. Okay, so we're back, and here's the first stage. So you load at this stage as many figures as you can, not load, but create as many figures as your scene, as your memory can support. So that will be determined by your system memory and your graphics card memory. And there's a couple of very important things at this stage. So do not add hair, do not add clothes, do not add morphs. So what are morphs? Morphs are things that shape these characters to look like specific people. So you might have a Victoria 4 base character made to look like Susan, for example. Susan might have a different face shape or different body type. Do not change the base textures. Keep the basic textures because they're low poly textures, okay? And when you're adding figures, keep in mind where these boundaries are going to be from the different preloads, not preloads, the different renders you're going to do. You can pose your characters because that doesn't take up any memory. You can change their expressions because that doesn't take memory. You can interact them with the background because that doesn't take memory. Do not do expressions that use morphs. There are some, Smiles Delight, I believe, uses actual morphs to create the expressions. They're better expressions, but they do take up extra memory. So anything, don't change the textures because additional textures, even if you just add one extra texture, takes up more memory. So what we're looking for at this point is to get our figures in with as little memory taken up as possible so that the scene is nimble. What do I mean by nimble? Well, the GPU determines how smoothly, let's just go to the main camera here. So I've got probably 14 characters in that scene, and I can still move around that scene fairly smoothly. But the more stuff I have in that scene, the more textures, the more juddery that's going to become. And we don't want to get to that because it makes it unbearable to work in the program. So just keep your figures to a bare minimum, pose them, put expressions on now, while it's still nimble and easy to move around, and interact them with the floor so that they're in the right height with the floor. Okay, so that's the next stage. So we created our template, then we created one half with the figures in. Now what we're going to do, we're going to save that as many many figures, whatever, left, or whatever segment number you have. You might call that segment 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to save it again as segment 2 with all of these things. And I know we've got a template that says just in case, okay? But we could instead just load the template and use a reference point, say the center of this bench, and then we won't have anything that goes across the center line of that. I think his fist actually does. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this with a different name. So I'm going to call that many figures left, no clothes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of these figures here. And I'm just going to keep the figures that are close to the borderline so that I don't put anything interacting with them. Now, what I don't want is for these figures to cast shadows on top of other characters. Now, I know a lot of you might be thinking, well, my preferred way is just to add a figure and then render it and then composite all of those individual renders in Photoshop. But the trouble is, each time you add figures, they cast shadows, and those shadows, you can use a shadow catcher to cast shadows on the background, and then you render with the shadow on the background. The background will actually be invisible, and that is a workflow you could do. So you could render the background, and then you'll render each of these characters separately, and then you'll composite in Photoshop. But the trouble is, when you do that, any shadows that they cast on each other, like this guy's arm on here, this baby's shadow here, these couple on each other, the soccer ball back into that scene, these people on the dog, any shadows that interact with other characters, if you don't also render those characters, then you lose those shadows. So they won't, you know, if I put, say, this guy here, his shadow casts that way, but it might kind of distort as it goes around his body. So the very least I need to do is to render both of these fully clothed. It's easier if you do it this way, trust me. Okay, so we do that. Then we save this scene, as I said, with the name of the next section that we're going to do. So we've already saved it section right. Now we're going to save it section left, and we're going to delete all of these characters here. You might want to use a hierarchy window to do that. You can get to that up here, window hierarchy editor, and it's nice and quick to do it there. I'm not going to show you how to do that now. So in this particular case, I'm just going to have 3 figures left in that scene, but it's going to be called section 2 or quadrant left. Okay, I'm going to go away. I'm going to come back. Right, well, I'll just describe the next stage because it's exactly what we just did again. What we're going to do in the next stage is we're going to populate the rest of the scene or the next quadrant or whatever. You know, if you're working in quadrants or if you're working in groups, you're just going to work around your scene, adding people and saving that, adding people and saving that, and so on. Okay, but in this case, I just did it in 2 bites of the pie. I had people on the left, people on the right. So I've saved my file now called people left and deleted all of these, and now I've added all my people to the left, and I now have a left side as well as a right side. Let me see if I have that somewhere that I can show you. Okay, and that's here, people on the left, except they're already closed. It doesn't matter. That's the next stage. Okay, so we've now got a whole bunch of saved sections, or 2 left and right. It's better if you do left and right than top and bottom, because if you go top and bottom, shadows often pass from the front to the back because lights tend to be in the front. And once you've done them, you're going to go to your first save, and now you're going to add all of the clothing and all of the hair and all of that stuff, morphs, hair, clothing. So you're going to make it the finished scene, and then you're going to save that with another file name. So that would be many people, in my case, many people with clothes, right. And then I'm going to repeat for the other sections. In this case, many. So this time I'm just going to load the other save that I did with all the people in this side, and I'm going to call that many clothes left, clothes, and I'm going to clothe and put hair and morphs on everybody in that section. And at that stage, I'm also going to make sure that the figures interact with any set elements properly. So often when you add shoes and clothes, it raises the figures up. Well, the shoes will pass into the floor, so you're going to have to raise the figures up just a little bit. Or here where you've got clothes, you might need to raise her up a little bit so her clothes don't bury in the leg, and over here as well. Okay, so that's really just the fine details. So now we're in the stage where we've got all of our different groups fully clothed, and they're all saved under different file names. Now, there's two ways that we can go here. We can go the Photoshop heavy way, or we can go the poser way. I prefer the poser way. So what we do is we go to that's saving at this moment. Okay. I'm just going to load. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so here's the left side of our image. Everything's fully clothed. Everything's textured. Everything has morphs. This kid looks awful. His skin colour's too bright, but just for the sake of this example, and her eyes are a bit scary, but it doesn't matter. So everything is in place. If I had the other half of this scene connected now, it would be complete. But what we're going to do, we're going to set the render dimensions and the render quality settings, and we're going to do a render here. Then we're going to save that render just in case. Now, there's an ideal way of going forwards from here, and there's a have to make do way depending on how much memory you've got. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this scene and we're going to delete everything from this scene that is duplicated in the other scenes or in the other segments. So remember, we've got our very first scene, which was right, or in this case, depending on your memory, it could be bottom quadrant or first group or whatever. And you're going to delete all of these bits here, and you're going to leave this. You're going to delete the light, you're going to delete the pterodome or whatever background you've got, you're going to delete the set, you're going to delete the plants, you're going to delete everything except the cameras and the figures, and then you're going to save that again. So in this case, I'd call that left fully clothed, no figures, no backgrounds. And now there's a way that we can go forwards. You'll take your original image, or right, so I should have loaded the other part to show you. Right, I'm going to be back in a minute, but just bear in mind, each time I load, you're actually 5 or 10 minutes away. This scene now with them fully clothed takes 908 megs in memory. It's a 908 meg compressed file, which means it's about 2 gigabytes expanded in memory. So if you're on a 1 gig or 2 gig, even 4 gig graphics cards, you may run into trouble. But anyway, I'm going to go back and I'm going to load the other half in a second. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, I'm back. So here's my original half scene. Everybody clothed now. I've done a test. I've done a render on this scene set to the correct resolution and quality settings. I've rendered any other parts. In this case, it's just the other half, but in your case, it might be multiple groups of people, each with their backgrounds. I've rendered those and saved those renders. And now in my other sections, I deleted all the backgrounds and the light, so I don't have any duplication. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to do import poser document prop. And I can now import those other sections minus their lights and their backgrounds and everything, and I can import them into this image. So if you're very lucky, you can get all of those characters in memory. It's going to be awful to navigate, especially once you've got clothes and all of the extra figures. It's going to be very, very bad to navigate, but you might be able to at least get a save and a render out of it. Now, here's the really important part. Every time you render, the memory goes down a little because Poser has what's known as a memory bleed, which means it doesn't fully recover the memory from each render. Also, all of the other programs that you are now, I'll be honest, I'm not saying this to Willy Wave because I've got probably about 10 other windows open and I can still render this. But for most people who are short of memory, what you're going to want to do is create the scene with everything in. So you're going to use that import every section that you need into a single image. If that lets you do that, that's fantastic. Then when you've done that, you're going to save that scene and call it something like scene all or something like that. Then you'll have a final scene that you could have always created in the first place, but would have been too painful to navigate, because each extra figure you add takes up GPU memory, and GPU memory slows the scene down. So you've saved that scene. Now you're going to shut Poser down. You're going to shut down everything else that's running, especially including web browsers, because they take up a huge amount of memory. It's ridiculous how much they take up. You're going to close, Photoshop, even little stuff like Teams and whatever chat software you might have, everything, to shut everything down, or even better, just restart your computer and then reload this scene from scratch. So load Poser, load this scene. Now, just to give you an idea, this scene takes 2 gigabytes on the hard drive, which means it's probably the whole scene with all of the parts in. So it means it's probably 5 or even 10 gigs in memory. So that takes a monster amount of time to load. Not only is it slow to load, but the reconstruction time in Poser memory is unbearable. I'm going to do that now. I'll be back in 6 weeks' time. Okay, so here's my final scene with everything merged. You can see I can move over all of these things and select them. I can move over the things in here. So all that remains now is to click render. Now, if you want a scene with 28 figures in, you're going to need a fairly impressive PC or Mac to do it with. The chances are you're not going to be able to merge a scene like this. So I have the good fortune of being able to render this. I don't need to think about what shadows might go where or what characters do what. I've just merged multiple figures. And when I was designing this scene, even though I was aware of where the figures might overlap, I don't necessarily need to do that because I can load them all in memory at once. But if you do need to be aware of that, what you're going to do is you're going to render each segment, as I said earlier, with the background in and the lighting. And then you're going to have a series of images. In this case, I just had 2 images. Let me show you. So now I'm going into my image editor. And there are 2 ways we can do this. We could use the clone tool. This is Photoshop, but it worked well with whatever else you're using because this is really basic stuff. If I'm going to use the clone tool, what I'm going to need to do is to load the second image. So this is group right. Let's do group left. So open group left. So this is the second half. What I would do is I would either go, I would set up a clone source here. So clone basically copies bits from, I'll just demonstrate, it's easier, right? So here's the clone tool. And if I set this as the origin, I'm holding down control and see this little cursor here, I'll set his face as the origin. Now I've let go, wherever I start drawing it clones that across, but I can also do that between images. So I can set that clone, I'll pick up his face here and I go into this image and I can set that clone into this image as well. Now that's not aligned properly. So what you would usually do is you'd zoom into some point in the corner, you'd zoom right in here, and then you do the same with your source image. The source image is the image that you're coming from. You'd reduce the size of the brush to as small as it can. I'm using square bracket left. And then hold down the Alt and pick up the cornermost square. Then I go to this image, make sure I'm in the corner, and now I just left click with the mouse button. And now what I've done is set the other image as a source overlaid to this image, and you'll see how that works in a second. I'm going to increase the size of that brush and I'm going to make sure that this is aligned. So every time I start to draw, it draws this relative place to the other image. Like if I didn't have that, each time I let go and click, it'd reset to wherever I'd picked the image up in the first place. And now what I can do is I can just start drawing in place on that image. That's one way to do it. And that's great, except you can't see where the stuff is you're drawing. Now that works fine. Look, I've cloned one thing to another and that works fine. You might find that that's a bit too complicated for you, and if you do, there's another way of doing it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that image, and here what we could do is we could either do Control A to select everything, Control C to copy, and then paste that into here with the Shift button. So I'm pressing Control Shift V, and it places the image on top of the other image in place. If I didn't press the Shift, let me show you what happens if I don't press Shift. Control V, so that's paste, same with any document. Look where the cursor is, kind of over here somewhere. Control V, and it doesn't necessarily align on top of the image. I'll show you a situation where that doesn't happen. Supposing I'm zoomed in. Press Control V, and that may, oh, okay, it didn't on that occasion, but it doesn't necessarily align on top of the image. I prefer to do it this way, which just takes out that step. I just do File, Place, and depending on your version of Photoshop, you're going to have Place Linked or Place Embedded, and we just do Place Embedded, and then we do Group Left, and it just puts it straight on top of the other image here. And now I'm just going to open up here my palette, and you'll see here now I have a layer called Group Left, and that's currently defined as a smart object, which means when I scale it and various things, it contains a reference to the original image. But I don't need that. Excuse me. I don't need that to be a smart image, so I'm going to right click in this area here, and I'm going to choose rasterize layer. So now it's no longer a smart image. Okay, so what I want is this image, but I want to see what's underneath it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I don't have a tool like a brush tool or ever selected, and then I'm going to press a number to make this layer semi-transparent. So I'm going to go 5, which is 50% transparent. So now I can see underneath it. And this side is the top image, this side is the bottom image. So what I need to do is reveal this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, I can use lasso or I can use magnetic lasso, poly lasso, doesn't really matter. I'll just do freehand lasso, and I'm just going to select okay, so this guy is in that side image. I can just check that by making the top image invisible. So I'm going to cut here. Well, it's not cutting, I'm selecting. See, there's a shadow there that I didn't account for. And then I'm just going to go all the way around here. If I let go now, it'll just join into the original thing. So what I've done is created a selection. And now if I just press delete, everything in that selection will be deleted. And that reveals the image underneath. Now Control D to unselect, and 0 to make that back to full transparency. I could, instead of pressing the numbers, depending how your Photoshop or image editor is set up, I could have used the layer opacity here to change the visibility of that layer on top. And you'll see now, there's my image, and that works, doesn't matter how many different layers you've got. What you want to do is to bring in your group, place it on top of the base image, select, here's another way that we could do, let me just show you that. Right, so here we are back to this. What I could have done is supposing I just had this little group here, what I did was I drew my selection around these guys. It's going to be rough and dirty. Okay, right, I just get rid of that selection. Right, so I just draw around this group here. So now if I press delete, I'm going to delete that group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control I, believe it's I, Control Shift I, oh sorry, Control Shift I. Or I could choose from the menu up there, edit, and then it's invert somewhere, select inversion. Transform selection, inverse, there you go, Control Shift I. And what that does is it reverses what has been selected. So I selected this group because it was easier to select, and then I just did Control Shift I, and it now unselected that group and selected everything else. And then when I delete that, it deletes everything else. So I'll just go to here, hand control, delete everything else. Okay, so, and then all that would remain, let me just go back. Okay, so I've got my group there, my group on top. I'm going to select the group on top. I'm going to do that selection again. Oh, okay, there's another way I could do this, one more way. I could select the eraser here, and again, being able to see the group underneath. So I need to erase to let this side come through. So I've got the eraser, and the eraser flow and opacity are 100%. Nice big brush here, and I'm just going to erase everything that I don't want from that top layer, like that. So there's multiple ways of doing this. The good thing about the eraser is it lets you get into the nibbly little details like that. And then I'm just going to set that opacity back to 100. And what I would usually do at this stage is I'd just flatten that image so it's just a single layer, and then save that before you do anything else. And obviously you can set the levels or whatever you want, put text or whatever you want from that image. But there, guys, is how you create a scene with 26, 28 people plus clothes. So really that's probably equivalent to 50 to 100 people with their clothes and their hair in a single poser scene like this. I will just say one more thing. For you DAZ Studio people, there's a merge option instead of an import option, which achieves the same thing. So you can save partial scenes, get rid of all the backgrounds, and then merge your scenes together. So you can do exactly the same thing in DAZ as you can in Poser. So don't think I've ignored you. Hopefully you found that useful, guys. It's a pretty long tutorial, but I think it's very, very valuable when you want really busy crowd scenes that have got high quality, individually clothed and posed figures. It takes a while. This has taken me days to set this up, but I think it's worth the end results. So you take care. I'm just going to leave up on the screen for a little while a summary of what we did so you can work through the steps. First of all, let me just show you the final scene, and then I'll show you the summary. You take care, guys.